Council study session. We have some presentations on our agenda tonight. First, we have Justice Center project update. Mr. City Manager?
Yes, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, a project that the council set city staff's foot upon a few months ago was exploring the idea of a regional crime lab and justice center. We've been working with J.E. Dunn on the early precursors of such a project. As that's a project of some notoriety, we want to make sure we're giving the council routine and regular updates about that. So tonight I'm going to begin by turning over to Assistant City Manager Adam Norris.
Good evening. I'll be very brief. I'm going to introduce Michael Collins. He's leading this effort from the J.E. Dunn team, and you probably recognize him from a meeting a few months ago. And he'll introduce the rest of the team that's here on this project.
Thank you, Adam. Good evening, Councilman. My name is Michael Collins with J.E. Dunn, and wanted to just give you a very, very brief update on the City of Independence Justice Center, what we're doing, what we've done to date, and really provide you a clear sense of where we're going in the immediate future for this project as we look through it. So first is to do three key things for this project, and really the validation of the study that you all started in 2017, and then the design master plan work that was completed in February 2018, and then presented to this council in May of 2018. So we wanted to unpack that a little bit of some of those key findings that we believe are critical and essential as we move forward with this process. And then provide you the technical requirements and pre-development goals that we would need to unpack as we look through this process and dig deeper to understanding the City Council and the City of Independence needs and desires. And then thirdly, we'll talk to what this project would lead to moving forward. So very first, again, my name is Michael Collins. I wanted to provide you with some of the people who are on the team that are here tonight. Jim Coulter from J.E. Dunn Construction. He is our project executive on this for this endeavor. Sabin Yanez from Cook, Flatt and Strobel. Jim Schusler from Cook, Flatt and Strobel. Mike Hewley from Helix, and Craig Davis from Craig Davis and Associates. So this is part of our team, not our full team, but these are the people that will be working with you and your team with the city as we move forward with this endeavor to see what the pathway for the future will be. So, to unpack the validation of the study, as we all know, you took forward this endeavor in 2017, but in 2018 provided a blueprint of what that potential could look like for a new justice center. The evaluation was for the future police force and municipal court needs. It identified space limitation impact on current and future justice center operations. The assessment and work made evident in 2018 Justice Center report was the makeup of the law enforcement operations, including field and specialized units. And as we saw last month, or sorry, in December, the impact of that when we did the tour. So a couple of the recommendations, we weren't going to go through the whole litany of the recommendations from that study, was really to make evident the need for additional staff improvement efficiencies for that justice center, or for a new justice center. And then a phased approach to that. So every step of the way, we're really identifying critical opportunities and challenges that may be negated or something that we can address in real time. So that phased approach could be a design build or design build finance strategy. And we'll briefly talk about that a little bit more tonight. So then it goes to the overall goals. Obviously, the overall project goal would be to create a dynamic project funding and financing strategy to make this Independence Justice Facility a reality. Looking at tax-exempt finance, looking at alternative revenue-generating sources, how would this project become reality? The second deliverable or objective would be to deliver a new Independence Justice Facility in a design-build format, even it may be design-build finance or just design-build delivery, because we do believe with the experience of our team and the projects that we've done in the past that the construction speed, the speed of the overall delivery, and hopefully unit cost reduction would be components that we would believe would be viable to this project as well to the city of Independence. Really looking forward to identifying things, not to just value engineer something, but really to look at how could we possibly provide a new justice facility, but also reduce the overall cost of that project, but delivering still what you would desire. Then, so the overall project goals is to really look at that three-pronged phase approach, and what does that look like? So really, in the pre-development and pre-construction phase is what we're doing now. Really taking a look at what has happened with the Hafer-Wysocki study, what could move forward with the programming and the design, and then move into a design-build phase to really provide a project schedule to really unpack how this project could be built. And then, most importantly, the project funding and finance. I look at those as two different disparate components. The project funding being how is this going to be generated, this is the debt service, and then the financing is through what source would we finance this mechanism. And please interrupt me at any time you choose. So really what we're going to now is the technical requirements and the pre-construction goals. So this is what we're looking at and moving forward right now. The objective would be to develop a cost and plan of action for next phases of the program, design, construction, and funding feasibility. So as the study prescribed, we're looking at a 125,000 square foot base project, which will also include secured parking, detention facilities, obviously police facilities, municipal court, and a municipal jail, as well as expansion and fleet maintenance. The detailed costs would also, for all of the project components, go from conceptual design to preliminary budget, to where we know this is the scope, the cost, here's what the full determination of the project would be if we were to build it at final design. So we would know all of that. That's what we're trying to unpack today to give you realistic costs in a very efficient and effective manner. Also, what we're looking to achieve is provide an estimated square footage for the regional crime lab. And as we had heard from the discussion from the last council district meeting that we heard about that, we wanted to include to understand that. As you know, J.E. Dunn has experience with that with regard to regional crime labs, one we did in Kansas City for their regional crime lab. So we would like to unpack some of that information as well, if it's necessary for you all. We know that that may be an additive component, but it's something that we wanted to provide you all as fast as we could as well. Then on the second technical requirements, we're really looking at a preliminary financing feasibility plan. What is it going to, so the scope we're going to look at, how do we verify project programming consistent with the cost estimates that would be created? How do we synchronize revenue sources and innovative financing to really provide something to the city of Independence that you all feel is efficient and effective? And then a detailed outline of process to create the alternative funding and financing solutions. So really, we're not just trying to provide you with a suite of ideas and saying, here's what we think you should do. It's really unpacking that level of detail of saying, here's what we believe would be the option, piggybacking off of those studies, but then providing you with a detailed, accurate understanding of what the funding mechanisms would need to be done, as well as the financing that would need to be carried out, and how long that financing term would need to be. And then provide a thorough report of project delivery through design build and design build finance strategy, really providing you all an understanding of looking at those options while similar, looking at them in two different silos to understand exactly what the costs would be. Then third, last but not least, is really the project schedule. Really understanding and unpacking the integrated project schedule to include the project funding and financing, the detailed overview of conceptual to full design, at what time do those take place, as well as the estimated schedule for obviously the construction, the site work, the utilities, all of those components. So really providing you a thorough understanding of how this project would make sense in an effective manner. So I don't expect you to read all of this right now because they're really small line items there, but this is kind of what we will be, this is what we will be looking at for the next 90 days as to, from a pre-construction and pre-development phase. All the questions and those details of what we're going to provide from those bullets from the earlier slides, this is categorized in here from that project management scale so that you understand kind of not only where we are going to deliver that, to the city, but how we're going to deliver that as well. We want to give a full, thorough analysis of how we could provide this project to you. So then all of that to say, what does this lead to? These initial steps lead to a refined understanding of challenges and opportunities. We understand from the previous studies that there are a lot of them already outlined. We want to unpack that a little bit more, we're not trying to recreate the wheel. But because of the time, because of the project and the process, we want to make sure that we're looking at any challenges as well as any opportunities that may have been missed or may be out there that is appropriate at this time. So we're not looking to create another litany of constraints. We're looking to identify additional constraints or opportunities that may have been missed and address them very quickly. And then we're also going to lead to a strategic approach to alternative funding establishment, identifying, outlining what this process is going to look like and how it could be funded. And then a strategic critical path for a phased project completion. At each stage, you understand how we're trying to create a path for success, what steps are opportunities we have to move forward with that success, and what challenges that we may incur throughout that process. So doing a phased approach does quite a few things. It still maintains efficiency and speed, but it also maintains and protects cost. It also gives a lot of feedback that obviously this is a community-oriented project, and we very much take that seriously. So what this does is provide for a structural and programmatic deliverable from the Justice Center. What is it that we are going to be delivering? And then at the end of the day, we can only provide so much because obviously this is a go, no-go decision. And so we're going to take that very seriously as we unpack the potential deliverables for this project. So that is all we have, but more than happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much, and I know the immensity of this situation and what it costs, but we have, in the past, voiced the concern as to what the now existing building will be done with. And I don't see anything here on that. One of our council members, didn't you direct that, Councilman Perkins?
Yeah, well, that is a concern, what we're going to do with that particular building. My also main concerns were also the meetings in all the 4 districts, too.
So a couple to answer both of those questions. The first was, obviously, we do need to have an understanding of the existing space. It's not, for us, really, it's not really discussing the repurposing of that, because we really need to unpack the strategic, or actually, really the structure of it and understand what the cost would be to renovate, to reposition, and then provide that level of detail. So that is not forgotten on you. We didn't include it in there, but it is something that is not forgotten from your past discussion. So really looking.
I didn't mean to suggest it was forgotten. It's sort of a catch-22. We're getting out because it's so bad. Mm-hmm. So what happens to it is my question. Any other? Councilman?
I appreciate you very much, and I know it's difficult to sit here and talk about something when you don't have hard numbers or anything, but I am, for one, not convinced that we need a new Justice Center. So I know that Mr. Perkins has been very concerned about what happens with the existing police building, and I guess I just have to make it clear that we are not going to close that police building unless I'm outvoted. So it's very important that we look to see how we maintain our police presence here.
Absolutely.
I mean, it is critical. And I also would like hard numbers on why should we even do this? I mean, tax, I think I saw something about no tax cost to some of this building proposal, and that's new and improved, and I've never heard of that before. So I'd be curious to see. The funding for me is extremely important, as well as the existing presence in this first district.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
mean, it's critical. And I don't even want to go further until we talk about that, because I don't know, I can't remember how much money we're spending for this. But if we don't have a basic understanding of what we're doing today with our existing building, I don't want to go further. We're wasting our money. Why are we doing that? So I guess it's really directed not to you, young man, but to the city manager. I'm sorry.
Can I be young man too?
Sure.
All right, thank you. $50,000 to answer your question, is how much
Okay.
we're working with right now. And we'll, different deliverables along the way will require us to come to the council for different decision points and additional funding. So go or no go will be a constant theme that you will see from us. There's going to be lots of check-ins there along the way. Loud and clear from the council that we don't want to close the existing police building. We're looking to provide enhanced services, expanded services. We know from our police chief that just to get our head at water level where we need to be adding 33 officers and support staff to help with that. And that's really kind of what's driving this decision, is we're out of space where we're at right now. So we've had studies a few years ago that predated me that looked at the cost of adding on versus the cost of doing a secondary site. The secondary site was just about the same cost as the expanded site, and so they're reaffirming some of that work as part of that project. But I want to reiterate again, loud and clear from the council, we know we need to continue to understand what our current footprint's going to look like at our existing site right now.
I'm just concerned that this is going to turn into my kitchen. When I remodeled my kitchen, I started with just wanting a simple sink.
Right.
And $25,000 later, because it gets out of control, and at some point, we're going to see this go, no-go decision, and we will have already gone so far, it's silly not to finish it. I don't want to get there.
Right. So before we put, a shovel in the ground is what I'm telling you. We're going to have a lot of meetings that look like this, where we're coming in either at a study session for an update so the council can either pump the brakes or pump the gas, whichever we feel like is in the best interest. But then council meetings where we would need legislative action to continue to pursue the project. So there are a lot of steps from now to getting into that kitchen, to borrow your analogy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You got all cheap.
I know. I am cheap, in case you didn't know.
My kitchen. And these are recommendations that we're giving, and you've heard it from three of us.
Yes.
And it's very important about the existing building, which would give you the no or no go, what we want in here to get that deal. And the financing, as Councilman
Yes.
has alluded to. And we need several things. I'm not saying we don't need this, but we need several things, and there's a lot of hot items on the agenda.
Right.
So
Right.
the more input I assume that you get, the better the result.
Yes, sir. And Councilwoman DeLucy, one of the reasons it was very important that we put that last bullet there, because we're not here to really just say, of course, go for it. We're here to really provide that additional detail of what the initial steps will lead to. And none of that said these initial steps will lead to a new building. These initial steps will lead to a refined approach. We believe that a no-go decision is obviously up there and very important to us. That's also why it's in caps. The second component to that is the phased approach. I've had the opportunity to be on the public side before, prior to me being at J.E. Dunn, and I know that's very important because you're dealing with constituent dollars and funds and taxpayer funds. So you're not here to waste those funds. So most importantly, you are here to make sure that there are also checkpoints and also protection of constituent dollars. And one of those things that we looked at is why we believe a phased approach is actually appropriate, instead of just saying, hey, let's go move forward, and at the end of full documentation, we make the decision not to do it, but my goodness, you might as well have already done it, given what you've spent. So we take that very seriously. Everyone on our team has a lot of experience in working with the public sector. That's very important to us. We want to continue to work with the public sector. So we take all of these questions and concerns very seriously.
Councilman?
Thank you. One of the things that, sorry, I'm getting used to my glasses here. One of the things I was really wanting to make sure took place was having the 4 public input sessions in all the city council districts. And it looks like they will be coming up in March as part of the possible time frame. From being around in the community and talking to a lot of the individuals in my community, they want the police officers in their car, in the community, out there making response times happen. This is very important to them, it's very important to me, as well as having a brick and mortar presence at some place. Right now we have, I hesitate to call it a substation in Fairmont, but a presence there. So that is definitely a concern to have and we want to look at. With these district meetings, I want to get that feedback and incorporate that feedback and concerns that they might have. So my question is, how will those meetings look? How will that kind of gel together? Will be a mixed presence of the consultants and maybe the police there to kind of discuss what the options are, what we're looking at to give a well-rounded community presentation.
So when you look at the, yes, Councilman, when you look at the 4 public meetings that you all had requested back in December, I believe, the most important thing is actually having all key stakeholders there at the same time. Number one, that everyone hears everything simultaneously and hear back from the community. So we would actually ask for, obviously, design and construction, and our team that's looking at alternative funding. They need to be there as well to hear what's going on from a constituent standpoint, as well as from a police presence, as well as the city itself. So that we all are on the same page with what we're hearing and really can navigate through that to make sure that we're all hearing the same thing. Or if we're not, what's the next step on that? So that's how, if I'm answering your question directly, that's how we would look at those district meetings. I think we hit all of them with the 4 district meetings. So that would be very, that's a key component because number one, you could show a building all day, but some people are going to ask, okay, tell me about the funds, tell me about the nuts and bolts of how this project is going to be funded and financed. It's usually a number one constituent question after you show them a new facility.
Correct. So within those meetings, will we be able to give them a good timeline? Can we share this timeline with them of what we're looking at?
Well, some of that timeline is still being refined. So this is just to give you a snapshot of where we kind of began. A lot of these things will still kind of move. Discussions with the city staff and administration, as well as the chief's office. Some of those will still move within the constricted time frame of this initial process. So while we're not completely married to these dates yet, they're not solid today, but this is how we're looking at kind of charting out our process throughout the next, I would say, 90 days.
Do you have any kind of specific idea of when those meetings might held specifically for the first district, as these dates get closer, so I can start letting individuals know,
Right.
Meg, or can let people know?
So the first thing obviously would be probably, I don't want to say mid to late spring because I don't really know where that is right now. I would probably say hopefully around April, and the reason being is because we need to unpack and reconvene with the city staff as well as the chief's office to make sure that we're already on the same page.
Sure, I understand.
And then provide the input, not even necessarily design, but really providing the input, because sometimes when you throw a design out there, people will react to the design and you kind of miss on the programming and the community aspect of the presence already here, and really be more of an expansion opportunity than a this or that. So really trying to understand that, and even understanding from the city's perspective your individual district components. All of you come from different districts, and so we're going to have to understand that as well as to how to communicate effectively within your respective constituency.
Well, I'll be more than happy to get with you and kind of give you a good thumbnail of the first district a little bit there. And I would love to have at least a 2-week notice to where we can get that information out, give people notice that this is going to be held and on their calendars and stuff.
It would be our intention to follow whatever the city's rules are on public notice. We would treat it the same way.
Okay, thank you.
I guess my question, there is a concern that we can get in over our head. This is a one-time deal, isn't it? I mean, we don't have a lock of money that we are distributing at different times.
So let me kind of expound on that just a little bit. There's a pretty key reason why staff recommended the project team that you're working with, and that's because there's a pretty limited path forward on this. As you said yourself, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, there's a lot of needs in this city, and we need to prioritize those. We see but a few different ways that this might work in competition with some of those other needs that we have. We believe this team would have that mentality of approaching the project from that direction. But again, I want to affirm, you're going to see a lot of us on this topic, probably at least every month for a study session update, and any expenditure of funds is going to require us to come to the council and get approval for that. So we will be in constant contact with the council about this. We can't move forward without it.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a staff report on the city's 2018 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, otherwise known as CAFR. No?
CAFR.
Mr. City Manager.
Yes, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council, we want to make sure that we're providing regular updates to the council about the finances of the city. So tonight I've asked our Director of Finance and Administration, Mr. Brian Kidney, to come and give you the report from our 2018 audit.
Wow, aren't you guys excited about this, right? Our financials for the year end. I want to first of all mention that we've presented the actual audit and the comprehensive annual financial report, which is called the CAFR for short, to the finance or the audit and finance committee, with Councilmember DeLucy being the chair, and Robertson and Perkins were also on this. During that presentation, we were explaining or exploring some of the deeper meanings, if you will, of some of the information in the CAFR, right? I mean, it's just, as we all do, we just love going in there. I'm sure I see some dog-eared copies up there of you going through the financials. But what I was, we were talking about at the committee meeting was kind of the big picture, if you will. And so they thought it'd be a good idea that I come and talk to the full council on record on some of those kind of real big picture things that are going to be guiding us, your policy and staff recommendations over the next couple of years, because some of the items, as we explore the financials and what it means. We focus quite a bit on budget, current budget, next year budget, maybe a CIP over a couple of years. And so in doing that, we're usually reporting to everyone on budget basis. Here's what we decided to do, budget, and here's our expenditures to get there, here's our revenue for the resources. What we do in the financial statements in the CAFR, we convert it to economic value. So what is the economic resources available to the city? And that goes more in depth. Instead of just a 1 year available resources, we go into what the underlying value are of our assets, what the impact of long-term debt is, and as you'll see, some other debt obligations. And so it's important as we're starting the budget process to really get an understanding. Everything that the staff will be bringing into recommendations has some of what I'm going to talk about kind of out there. So, where we have independence for all, where we're pointed towards this is our goals and this is where we want to go. Same thing on the financial side is where do we want to be at financially over the next several years. There's some big items out there that needs to be watched and mitigated. So as we're going through the budget process, we'll have those in the background, and we'll want to make sure we point it out. So this is strictly here's what it is, without much policy decision behind it. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so we're going to start with a lot of numbers, and that's why I put those numbers up there. So basically, as you're starting to talk about the financials, the first thing that we did is we took all the funds, whether or not they're governmental, general fund, or utility funds, so we've combined them together and say, here is overall statement of net assets. This is the complete value of the city, and I highlighted down below in the bottom right-hand corner, $1.2 trillion is the total assets and deferred revenues of the city. So, people ask, what's the size of your community?
When you're talking trillion?
Billion, sorry. $1.2 billion, yeah.
I thought we got really big.
Zeros here and there, okay. sorry, I always refer back to my personal finances. I get a little confused with the children. So, and so this item up here, I highlighted up here are, just the net assets. So we're on the governmental side, we're at 414 million, and on the business type activities, it's 758 million. Again, I'm just throwing a lot of numbers in here, but I want to put some of these in context. Keeping track, of course, I believe the council knows, the business type, that's our utilities, and also our event center. So event center, electric, water, and wastewater, or WPC, is what we refer to as business type activities. Everything else is being referred to as governmental activities there. So, of course, that was the asset side. What about the liability and net position of the city? I want to point out, here's our total net position overall is 210 million. But you'll notice that the governmental activities has a deficit of $35 million. And so then you start thinking, wait a minute, we're only talking about having a fund balance in the general fund or a fund balance in the governmental funds. Why is this different? And the reason is, again, it's going back to that current resources. The current resources of the city is our general fund and our governmental funds. We have the cash and we have fund balances to do the month to, or the year to year revenue versus expenditures. We're keeping up on that, right? We say this much money for street improvements, we budget for it, and we're staying positive each fiscal year because that's what we do. We bring forward at least a balanced budget. However, those other items that we're not keeping track of or haven't been, or aren't budgeted items, are those long-term liabilities that we do not keep track of in a year-to-year budget. So that's why we're seeing a negative net position of 378 million. And I highlighted two of the major items. And again, this is a, hey, I'm just talking about what it is. I'm not making any policy or any kind of judgment on this. Basically the city manager asked me to take a look at the finances. It's my first time to really get into the city finances since I've been here. And these are items that kind of stick out to me that I do not see as frequently in other municipalities, either that I worked in or that I was a financial advisor for. So definitely going to be pointing these out. First one, non-current portion of long-term obligations. So it's 177 million for governmental and 371 million for our business type activities. I think of business type activities, those aren't as big concern looking at these because we have rate models, we have financial plans that go out multiple years. And even though we have $371 million in debt, if you will, we're able to go back and look at the balance on the asset side. If I head back over there, of $510 million or $596 million in assets, right? So we have $300 million in debt, but we have $500 and some million in assets. So our ratios are at least positive in that regard. But when you go back, and I'm sorry, I'm not seeing the changes here, so I'm a little backwards on this. But when you go back to the governmental side, that first item that's highlighted is $177 million in long-term obligations. A lot of these are our economic development TIF bonds. And the other side of the balance sheet, we don't see that. We don't see the asset side of that, right? Those are development agreements that we promised to, or that were promised the revenues, the increment revenues coming in, but we don't have an asset to book there. So that's the math behind it. Now, whether or not that's too much or not enough or just right, that's kind of, it's a policy decision of, is it an investment, this additional money that's coming in? I'll have a slide to talk about how much dollars that is. Is that a long-term investment of the city? Obviously, when it was entered into, that was the idea. However, one thing to keep in mind, a lot of those agreements were done in somewhat of a different economy. A lot of these were done pre-internet. The whole economy since 2008's kind of adjusted. So that's one item that we're really going to be taking a look at.
Right. So how long do you kick these out? I mean, non-current, I would assume that there's various stages in various projects of time.
Right. So each of
So you put them together and get a mean? Is that what had happened here as well?
Well, what that is, actually, if you see, there's 177 in non-current, and then up above is 15.8 million. There's 15.8 million is current, which means that's the debt payments for next fiscal year, and then the 177 are year 2 and beyond. Again, that goes back to the way that governments operate. We're looking at the next fiscal year and our budgets and everything, and that's why it's broke out like that. But we do have back in the meat and potatoes, I guess, if you will, the financials, we have all the debt items lined out of here's just how much each of the TIF bonds owe. So we do have that in there. I'm also in a process of working with our financial advisors to help me or help us get our arms completely around all of the outstanding debt on all of our economic development policies, and again, help guide us as we're preparing budgets and making, giving our advice, I guess, if you will, our recommendations to the council.
So Brian, in theory, this number should go down.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. As long as you're paying on, we are.
Right.
We are
Yeah.
paying down.
As the TIF bonds are being serviced, that number will go down over time.
Right. And actually, there's a few of those bonds that actually have deferred principal. Mm-hmm. So, if you look over the last 3 or 4 years, that amount hasn't gone down as much. But when we'll start getting into the principal amount, then you'll see that amount.
Right.
So that's exactly what we're talking about. We just need to make sure we're aware as we're making, the item before I talked, that needs to be thought of in the same universe as understanding the overall financials.
Okay.
So that's all we're doing here, just making sure we all see the picture of Independence, the financial impact. So the next one that I've highlighted there, we have multiple liabilities as operating the city. The total OPEB liability of $190 million for governmental, $95 million for business type, for a total of $285 million, is again somewhat unique to Independence. OPEB, sorry, my
Means
voice is
what?
under. OPEB.
Want some water?
No, sorry. Other post-employment benefits. So other post-employment benefits.
So it'd be the retiree,
Retirees.
health insurance.
Health insurance. When it says other, the line below it says pension liability,
Right.
right? So then it's, well, here's our pension liability, and then the other liabilities. That's where the word other comes from.
Other than health, is there anything else that goes into other?
No,
Okay.
because we also have compensated absences are also in there. So you'll see another scale, and I'll talk about compensated absences also. So getting back to that $285 million or $190 million, again, there's not an asset on the books for this. That's why, again, you're seeing the unrestricted deficit as $385 million in the governmental funds. But at the same time, we'll be bringing forward, hopefully, a balanced budget. So that's the purpose of this type of reporting, is to make sure that people understand, yes, you can have a balanced budget every year, but how are you gonna handle these long-term liabilities that'll be coming up? Now, and I'll show you a little bit more detail on the debt here in just a second. I'm sorry, I only wanted to talk about 10 minutes, but we get excited when we talk about finances. So
Take your time, we're with you.
okay,
We're with you.
all right.
Some point stuff.
So this next section is just the other side of a balance sheet, right? You have a balance sheet, then you have an income statement. This is basically the income statement or statement of activities for all the funds put together. And it's kind of an interesting way that the reports are put together. First of all, it comes up and says, what's the cost of providing services to the city? So that's that first column, expenses. The cost of providing services in fiscal year 2018 for governmental purposes was $127 million. Do you see that on that right-hand side there? For business type activities is $192 million. So there's the total cost of providing services was $319 million. Then as you see on the columns going out, it's kind of interesting way it's set up. We start pulling out program revenues and grants specific to those programs. So the far right-hand side, you'll see what the net expense is, right? So if you go down, it's $97 million, basically, once we take out the program revenues and then the grants for governmental. So it's the cost of government to the taxpayers spread out, not to the taxpayers that paid a fee, but generally for governmental purposes was $97 million, right? The next half of this, well, there's the line there. The next side of this then is, well, how do we make that $97 million up? And that's where you see, here's where the taxes, sales and use tax, property taxes, and other taxes came in, and that's how we made up that $97 million. So if you look at the very bottom line, in 2018, it was $950,000 more in expenses than in taxes and other revenues. That's basically how you read this report. I don't really have much to say on this. I mean, $950 million out of, 300 and some million asset-wise is not bad. The one item, of course, and you see, however, you're adding to that deficit, the $35 million deficit, though. So, again, take that in connection. I just wanted to show that part of it because me, as I'm sure like you, are excited about how these numbers work. I know Zach probably every night goes home and reads this. So. Getting back to the taxes, I did want to show, here's how the tax revenue goes into each of the funds, and this is grouped together by general, TIF debt service, and then the non-major funds. Those are the three types of funds that receive taxes. So just as an idea, of the total taxes of $75 million, 46% of the taxes went into the general fund, 22% of our taxes went into TIF debt service, and 32% went into non-major funds. And basically those are the street sales tax, public safety sales tax, and park and rec sales tax. Any questions about this one? It's just pretty, I just wanted to show that breakout of how much our investment in economic development is right now. And this then goes back to the debt, where I talk a little bit more about the detail that makes up our debt of the government fund. This is just governmental. So this is just the general fund and then the special revenue fund. So, and I'm going to highlight, overall, we started the year at $433 million in debt. We ended up at $420 million. So how those, that's not bonds, not just bonds, but if I highlight this, there's our TIF loans and TIF developer obligations. Those are the ones highlighted in yellow. And then we have our OPEB liability, which I talked about before. But you'll notice that that increased $7.8 million this last year. And that's as kind of a calculation of future retirees, current and future retirees, what we think the cost of health insurance will be for current and future retirees, and then just the actuarial estimates of the rates and everything like that, and the actual claims. So again, as we're making decisions on our general fund and our governmental fund decisions, we have to keep in mind that that is a major expense of the city, that you don't see the other side of that transaction. We see the liability, but not the assets. The next part of this is the pension liability, and this is the city share in loggers. And so you can see it's 46 million, but the difference between loggers and our OPEB is you're seeing loggers go down. So it started at 46 million. We had a reduction of 9.8 million, and that's a direct result of the fact that it's a funded plan, where OPEB, our health insurance, is not a funded plan, right? We're not funding that liability. The pension we are. We do contribute 18% of payroll every year to loggers, and that's why that's those contributions plus the interest income that loggers earns, that's why that hopefully continues to go down. So that's a major difference between the pension and then again, the OPEB liability. And then finally, the compensated absences, which normally, I was talking to the manager, I was coming in, I wasn't really sure why this is growing the way it does. And it's not typical, but as I got a little bit more understanding of how we do compensated absence. So basically what this is saying, you see the 16 million for ending balance highlighted there. That says if everyone left the city right now or at June 30th, as an employee, we earn vacation and sick leave. And we vest vacation, I think, and sick leave in some cases. So that's the cost to pay that employee back for those what their vested interest is in vacation and sick. If they left, that's how much we pay out. So that's the total amount. However, as I understand it, we have our caps. So let's say we cap, you cannot earn more than 400 hours of vacation. Our policy has been, in order, before we pay that 400 down, let me see. So if an employee has 500 hours when they retire, we cap at 400, but we let that employee stick around on the payroll and use vacation or sick until they get down to that cap, and then we pay out. So that's something that's something I've talked to the city manager about. That's a little unique, and so something I think that needs to be addressed on down the road this fiscal year or on down. It is kind of unique. So in this case, you see it goes up about $1 million, about $1 million a year. This is a real positive presentation.
And is that
isn't it?
historically accurate? It's been going up consecutive years?
Yes, it does go up each year.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and this just isn't governmental. I want to point out that your utility rates are also have those same liabilities. So here's the liabilities then for the P&L, water, wastewater, and the event center actually doesn't have that. And finally, the other big item that I noticed going through this is our capital assets. So you can see our net capital assets is $325 million. I think I talked about that at the beginning on the assets. But what's interesting is I have those two arrows. One's going to the fact that our infrastructure, which you think that's our streets, basically. Streets and anything in the ground, non-utility here, is $403 million. We have depreciation of $200 million, so net of $280 million. What's concerning here is you see it's $278 million at the beginning of the year, or I'm sorry, $280 at the beginning of the year, but it's $265 at the end of the year. So our infrastructure is depreciating faster than what we're building back. And at some point, that really needs to be addressed. And again, this is not new. This is not over the last couple of years. This is a long term to get to that point. So again, you can see that where, when you see that a governmental assets have a net decrease, usually that's kind of a warning sign that maybe we're not putting as much back into infrastructure as you review these with
Brian,
other
when you
cities.
say that, are you talking about like the city-owned buildings that we have that's not keeping up with capital improvements, the
Right.
yearly maintenance, upkeep, and all?
Well,
of
it's
that
not just
line?
yearly maintenance, it's also major infrastructure. And that,
Sure.
typically that comes in with the streets. You know, just,
Okay.
streets and bridges are the big ones that you see on that. Buildings, we have listed at 51 million. The depreciation's 18 million on those. That's not horrible. But the one that really stands out is the infrastructure, where they're over half depreciated. So that was just kind of my observation when I was going through these. So I put up these four items, 4 areas to mitigate, or at least be aware of, something we need to have a plan for. And I've kind of asked Zach to challenge me, I guess, if you will, to come up with long-term plans on recommendations of making sure we can manage through those items that I talked about. Address the infrastructure deterioration, mitigate the impact on the OPEB liabilities, whether that means coming up with a funding mechanism like we do on the pension, or some other change in the OPEB. Assess and control the impact of compensated absences. I think that has a couple effects. That one does impact current year budgets. If you're holding positions open in order for people to get down to that cap, that does have impact. And then on the economic development side, we have a lot of money invested in economic development. But as I say, we need to fully forecast all of those funds based on the current economic climate. So that's another major project that I'm working on, is taking all those economic development, current outstanding projects, and doing analysis on them as if, okay, if we did them right now, what's the payback, to make sure if there's any real deficits coming up, that we, again, come up with a way to make sure we mitigate that. So, I'm sorry my voice is kind of getting out. I might have to get a drink afterwards. That's it.
Well, thank you. I think you've unleashed the Kraken. Is this going to be available to everybody?
I don't know why it wouldn't
Are
be.
you going to put it on?
Well,
or-
keep in mind, this is available.
I understand that, but
My,
you've worked long and hard on this, and in the 14.6 minutes that I've seen it, I got more questions than.
okay.
And I'm sure that
Okay.
I'm seeing from the audience a distinct interest, and I think that you're going to be, because when they come to me, guess who I'm going to give them?
Sure. I mean, it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
And I'm going to
we've
have
all
to stop
inherited.
down and see you too on some of these questions on this. So if you can arrange, the city manager, somehow to put this up to the public so that you'll never do this. No. Anybody? Council?
Thank you. Thank you, Brian, for the presentation. There's a lot to digest here. I know we talked about some of this at the committee meeting, and it was a lot for us to digest then. And coming back to the 4 major areas that you're talking about to mitigate, the 4 things that you've got listed for us on the back, I wondered if we could ask you to give us some options for each of those 4. Some recommendations, some concrete things that the council could look at and talk about and maybe act on within the next 6 months, before we get to the next fiscal year. There's just a lot to digest, and I think we need to then, after you give us some options, talk about those options and see if we want to go ahead with some of those options. Obviously, there's some huge numbers here that we're looking at. It's going to take a lot of years to pay down the TIF debt. It's going to take a lot of years to work out of the OPEB liabilities. That's going to take probably 20, 25, 30 years. Same with the TIF. That's probably going to take 40 years. So how can we mitigate some of those?
Sure,
And,
sure. And that, yeah, that's exactly,
Yeah.
again, what Zach has challenged me with.
and we're not going to be here in 40 years. I don't think I will anyway. But if we can make it easier for those in 40 years, I think we should, so.
One of the more glaring numbers is that OPEB had $190,000 million, thank you. Big difference there. $190 million there. With the new accounting standards that were changed, if I remember correctly from our Audit and Finance Committee meeting, we've got to show that now on our bottom
Sure.
line. And how does that affect us or not affect us?
Sure. Well, yeah, that's a good observation. This didn't just happen this year. Right? So let's be, fair. I mean, this has been on the city's, it's actually been in the footnotes for several years. But it would have taken somebody to really go in and do some real analysis to pull that number out. And so that's why then the new accounting standards then was, hey, we need to make sure we actually book that as a liability. And that was the impact this year. That's why you see, there was a comment saying fund balance as restated. Right. Without that, I believe the fund balance was more, 56 million. And then we had that, and then it gets you into the deficit, or not that much, but so yes. Now, how that impacts us, again, guess what? It's out there now, right? Mm-hmm. That's something that we show, and we're forced to show by, the rules of performing the CAFR. The rate, I think maybe one of the things you might be getting at is how does it impact how the rating agencies look at us. One of two ways. In one way, the rating agencies should already have an idea of this, right? On the governmental debt, we don't issue a lot of governmental debt. We issue utility debt where those are focused and tied directly just to the utility revenue or the value of the utility. It's not that material to the rating agencies on the utility side. So it will have an impact on the utility rating in that they do look at it, but not like they would if they're doing governmental, right? So on the governmental side, I did run some analysis on it. It caps, basically this size of liability caps us on our rating. So we're A right now is our general our governmental debt. And we wouldn't be able to go higher than A or A1 or A plus, I guess, with S&P with this type of debt. Now, having said that, if we didn't have any of the debt, we probably still wouldn't be getting too much out of A just because of our demographics and some other economy type things that the council really didn't have a control over. So it does impact us on that, on a little bit. The big impact, though, and this is kind of getting down in the weeds a little bit, that's what the rating will come out, and they may say, oh, we're A. And they may comment that, hey, they've got a lot of OPEB liabilities, but they'll still give us that A. The way the public debt is working now, there's so much data mining that the big underwriters, they will go in and see that. They don't care what S&P says. They'll look out and they'll see that large OPEB. They'll say, no way, we don't want anything to do with that. So it's not the rating so much. It's more of the, like if we have a large governmental debt service, that would be of concern. But again, I don't anticipate us having one for a long time, or, Missouri is very restrictive on doing governmental debt to begin with.
Is there a quantitative number this is increasing by each year?
In here we have, it's an actuarial, and it has some sensitivity analysis. So for instance, it's, $285 million based on this, but if the actuarial is, if the rate of health costs goes up 1% more than what we anticipated, it goes up to $350 million or $325 million. So there's a little bit of that in there, some sensitivity analysis, but it's an actuarially driven, so it's a little bit difficult to just kind of put down what is too much. There is, on OPEB liabilities, don't forget that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, in that that's grandfathered in. For instance, I've been here for 4 months. I don't remember the exact timing of when that was changed, but I won't qualify for retiree health insurance. So at some point, you've got this large debt, and then as people move on,
Well said.
that liability will decrease, and there's a finite end to it. It's just getting over that large hump. We need to do some analysis on what that means. We need to do some analysis. Does it make sense to fund it extra, get a funding plan, and get it a plateau of total costs, so we don't have this bubble that will just wreck a budget. Right now we're at $9 million annually. When does that become?
When does that bubble kick? Are we looking at 10 years out, 12 years out? Or is that something that we
I'd
have to
do a
look
little more
harder
analysis
at?
on that. Oh my gosh, thank you. All right. But did I answer that question? That's not very effective for me. It just completely throws me off.
10 years, 12 years? Do we have a number when?
We don't have a
that
number,
factor
but
hits?
I will say it's something that needs to be addressed sooner than later.
Okay.
When you're talking about $9 million, and I think that was the budget number. I'd have to look at someone over in budget and see if that's where we're looking at this year or not. You start thinking what $9 million would do with $9 million. Then if we're at that point, but then in 2 years we're at 12 million. I mean, if you look at our revenues, they've been pretty flat. I don't know if I have a good definition of what flat is, but I don't anticipate us revenue coming in to meet the healthcare expense rate, if you will.
If I remember right, my first fiscal year on the council this last round, I think we grew $140,000. That would be my definition of flat.
It's pretty flat.
That's all I got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Next, we have staff report.
I guess I should say thank you.
Second quarter performance measures update. City Manager?
Yes, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council, I'd ask Kristen Ayers to come up and give you your second quarter performance measure update this evening.
Apologize for experiencing technical difficulties. Just give me a second. Good evening. I will try and make this fast, since you all have seen a similar presentation every quarter for a little over a year now. So, since you're pretty familiar with the format of the dashboard, I'll just give you a quick reminder that it's built around the Independence for All strategic plan, and the purpose is to help us measure how well we're meeting the objectives laid out in that plan. As a high-level overview, this is how we did on our quarter 2 goals, which is the same overall picture that you've seen in the recent quarters, with quality being the only goal that is yellow. So first I'm going to go over some wins for the second quarter. First, we have the percentage of code enforcement cases that were started proactively. So this measures the percentage of cases in which a code enforcement officer starts a case, so there's no citizen complaint. This quarter, we had 22% of our code enforcement cases that were started proactively, And this number is high this quarter because there was a corridor code enforcement initiative that was started in the middle of December. The Corridor Code Enforcement Initiative involves systematically using proactive code enforcement on the major corridors and entryways into the city. This project in December took place on Truman Road and lasted a little over a month. There were 177 properties that were inspected by codes, zoning, and WPC, who was looking for fat, oils, and grease program violations and sanitary sewer and stormwater violations. Of the 177 properties, 84 had property maintenance violations, 26 had zoning violations, and 7 had WPC violations. At this time, 3 abatements have been ordered and 14 tickets have been issued, and the other properties have had their first recheck inspections. The next measure we have is number of dangerous buildings demolished. The goal is to demolish 5 dangerous buildings per quarter to help achieve the strategic plan objective of reducing blight. This quarter, the city demolished 10 dangerous buildings, totaling an investment of $108,000, and the price of the demolitions ranged between $6,000 and $31,000. And lastly, for the wins, we have new capital investment. So this measure is tracked by the Independence Economic Development Council, and their goal is to create $12.5 million in new capital investment each quarter in the city. This quarter, $16.9 million was generated, so pretty high. To end the calendar year, there was a total of $45.7 million in capital investment that was brought in, which is just slightly under their yearly goal of $50 million. So the next group of measures I'll go over are those that haven't reached their goal but are close or are making progress toward their goal. So first we have visitors at historic sites, and this measures the number of people that visit the city-owned historic sites each quarter. And the goal is to increase the number of visitors by 3% over the previous fiscal year quarter. So this quarter's results of 10,650 visitors is slightly under the second quarter results from last year. This may be attributed to 3 days of site closings due to snow during that time period, and there was one less Saturday during the holiday season for Santa's visits in the Visitor Experience Center.
So does this include like the Truman Library too, where the shutdown would have affected the number?
No, so this is just the city-owned
Okay.
historic sites.
Thank you.
Next, we have the average answer time for customer calls to the Utility Customer Service Center. This measure has been highlighted a lot since the inception of the dashboard because of the many changes that have occurred during this time. This quarter, the average answer time for calls was 13 minutes, which is well below last quarter's time of 18 minutes and 43 seconds. Call times are still long due to customer questions about the billing system and the need for the account information reps to spend time going over reasons for high bills and also offering energy-saving strategies to the customers. A challenge facing the reps that will continue to keep times high going forward is the process of setting up and monitoring payment arrangements. Lastly, we have number of single-family building permits. This quarter, 16 building permits were issued, which is a decrease from last quarter and a decrease from the second quarter of last year. However, since 34 permits were issued last year, we look on track to bring in the yearly goal of 100 permits. This trend is not just affecting us. The Kansas City Home Builders Association also reported a decrease in single-family permits in their second quarter. So the last items I wanted to cover are public safety response times, as these have been measures that were items of interest in the previous quarters. The fire department's response time of 8 minutes and 31 seconds gets a yellow arrow this quarter because it decreased from last quarter. The police response time of 6 minutes and 30 seconds, while it's much closer to the goal than previous years, is only red this quarter because it increased slightly from the last quarter. Both of these departments have gone through recent software upgrades, and they're both in the middle of implementing proximity dispatching, so we will continue to monitor the response times to see the effects of those changes. And with that, I will take any questions.
I just have one. Where you talk about the number of dangerous buildings that have been demolished?
Yeah.
Does that number, that's just the city demolition, right? This doesn't include private demolition,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Because I think we've had more than this number in the city. This is just where the city actually has to pay the money to get
Right.
it done. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Let me turn this on. And next, Mr. City Manager.
Yes, I'm going to ask Jason Newkirk to come forward and give the council an update. Part of the budget that the council adopted for the current year included a restructuring of some of our internal service departments and the newly branded Finance and Administration Department. So a lot of the effort around that has involved technology services, and Mr. Newkirk's certainly been a key part of that. So I've asked him tonight to just share some of the exciting projects and transformations that have been going on. So I'll turn it over.
All right, great. Good evening. Yes, like Zach said, tonight I'm going to be covering some of the things that we've worked on in technology services, as well as current projects that we're working on and some future projects. So to jump right into it, so on completed projects, one of the bigger things that we've been working on for a long time, and you've heard me come up here and talk a lot about, is CityWorks. So the very first thing that we implemented within the permits and licensing module of CityWorks would be building permits. That consisted of a little over 50 different types of building permits. And then we also built a handful of web apps to integrate with that for applying and paying for building permits online. Then we moved on to business licensing. This one was kind of unique. We actually, it has a large online presence. So we built 22 web applications to interface directly back into CityWorks so that people can apply, renew, transfer, update, request duplicates, and then pay for all of those different types of permits online. So it was a pretty substantial project, both from the CityWorks standpoint as well as just a general software development project. And then next we moved on to contractor licensing, and we once again implemented those contractor license types within CityWorks and provided 2 different web applications for that, the application and renewal of contractor licensing. And then next, so this was an interesting project to work on, was rental ready. So we already had in the system, we had landlord licenses. But what we didn't have was we didn't have the individual rental units, and then we needed to start tracking the inspections on each of those individual rental units. So we did an assessment and we looked at it, and CityWorks could handle quite a bit of it, but it couldn't handle the individual inspections on the rental units and still tie them back to the landlord in a good way. So what we did is we extended that application out a little bit. So we're still using CityWorks for that, but we extended it and added a little functionality. We also built a mobile web app for the inspectors. As they're out in the field, they can go and complete those inspections, and it automatically gets saved back to the system, and it's there immediately as soon as they save it. The next is we worked on LLC registration. So once again, that was we set it up in CityWorks and then built a web application for registration online. We just recently completed working with Public Works to build out quite a few permits for them. This includes right-of-way permits, construction permits, and erosion permits. And then lastly, this last summer, we did a major version upgrade of CityWorks. So we brought it up to the latest version, and at the same time, we worked with a contractor to upgrade our GIS system. So we brought those both up to the most current version at the same time, and that gave our end users some enhanced performance, some enhanced functionality, and just general stability upgrades. So moving out of CityWorks, but still on our completed projects, we've had a performance dashboard for a little while, but we updated that performance dashboard to match the council goals. We also worked with outside contractors to implement both utility billing and municipal court system. We also implemented a new credit card processor for all of our online payments. So we have 29 different web applications online that accept payments. So we had to modify each of those applications to integrate with our new credit card processor. And we just went fully live with that about 3 weeks ago. So that one's a recently completed one. We also worked on the Uptown Market and deploying Wi-Fi in that facility and then connecting that back to our fiber ring. And we did a similar sort of thing in the new dispatch center. We built out that network and then connected that back into our fiber ring. And then also, we were once again named by the Center for Digital Government as one of the top 10 digital cities in the country. So moving on to current projects. So probably our biggest project that we're currently working on is implementing code enforcement within inside of CityWorks. So we originally, when we first started talking about this project, we were considering using an outside contractor for that, and we got some pricing back on that, and it was around $150,000 or so. And then we started meeting with code enforcement staff, and we quickly discovered that they have a very specific process that they have to go through. And CityWorks matched up with it pretty close, but it was another situation where we saw that we were going to have to extend the functionality of that just a little bit to match those business processes and keep them operating efficiently. So that's what we've been doing. We've been building it out, both from the CityWorks side as well as a software development side. So just to give you an idea of some of those extensions that we added. So a couple of them we're pulling in county property records so that we have accurate ownership information on a case whenever it's created. We're also doing some automatic scheduling of those inspections. So each code enforcement officer is assigned to a specific region of the city. And so depending on where that case comes in at, it automatically assigns them to the correct code enforcement officer. We're also working on city-sourced, implementing city-sourced right now.
Can I interrupt you just
Yeah,
one
go for it.
second? Sorry.
Yes.
Back to the code enforcement. What's
Yeah.
the time range on getting that fully integrated, would you guess?
Yeah, so we're shooting to get it done before their busy season, so when the grass starts
spring?
to grow
Yeah, okay.
and things, yeah, so spring.
Good, okay.
Yep,
Could I ask one more question?
yeah, sure.
So on code enforcement, I know they have their own app, I think, where they can download photos and
Yes.
put those online or have them at their disposal. Is that going to be accessible for the public?
For the photos.
If the public wanted to send in, instead of sending in a request, can they send in a photo?
Yes, so let me get to my next point, and
Okay,
it will
okay.
answer your question. So, okay, so city-sourced. So what that is it's going to be replacing our Citizen Action Center, which is the way that citizens send in requests to the city. And it's going to, so they'll have two options whenever they they can either go online to our website and submit that service request, or they can use a mobile app. Either way, they can add attachments, they can pinpoint a location, and all that information is going to be it's going to be fully integrated with CityWorks. So it's going to save all that information off to CityWorks, which is where everybody's working right now. So it's going to really minimize the time between the service request coming in and getting to the employee that's actually going to respond to that service request. It's going to streamline that whole process.
So will
Yes.
they need to have an actual address, or can I say the southwest corner of Nolan and 23rd Street?
It's really cool. You have a map, and you can say it's
Awesome.
right there. So,
Thank you.
yep. And so the next thing, moving on from city sourced, is the leave of absence request system. So before, whenever somebody had to travel for work, there was a nice cumbersome paper process that we had to fill out. We had to fill out all these papers, and we had to start shuffling them from person to person to get approvals. So now, what we've done is we've just streamlined that process. There's going to be an online system. People fill it out, they attach whatever their documentation they need to attach, and then it starts working its way through the approval process throughout the city paperlessly. And it'll ultimately get approved. The person will go on their trip, they'll come back, and they'll have receipts and things like that, and they'll be able to attach them to that travel form and basically complete the process there. So this one's on our current projects, but it's partially done. So actually on Friday, we went live with the form itself. So people are just now starting to fill that out and start to go through that approval process. The piece that we don't have completed yet is the open data integration, which actually leads me to my next point. So we've had an open data portal for a little while, and we've got a number of data sets out there. It's constantly growing. We're trying to add several of those every year. But citizens have gotten to the point where they're they're expecting a little bit more out of the data that we're providing. So we felt that it was a good time for us to go and kind of redevelop that open data portal. So that's what we're doing. We're completely overhauling it. It's going to have all the same data, but we're really focusing on searchability and usability. What we want to be able to do is be able to go to these large data sets and be able to search for specific information in there and really filter it down. So hopefully I will get to come back and demo that for you sometime soon. So now on to our future projects. So back into CityWorks. As soon as we finish with code enforcement, we're going to start working on dangerous building inspections. And then following that, we'll be working on food handler permits and restaurant inspections. So the food handler permits, it has a pretty important web presence currently. So, and we're going to have to make that fit into CityWorks as well. So right now, people can apply for food handler permits. They can renew them. They can also take online tests for that renewal process. So we're going to have to rework those existing applications to integrate back into CityWorks. And then we're also looking at some cloud storage options. So we've got several departments that are really starting to use CityWorks to its fullest capabilities. And as a result, one of the things that they're doing is they are starting to take videos of city assets as they're doing inspections. So like the inside of sewer pipes is a really good example, which is great because then they have a lot more information when they go back to re-inspect that. They can say, hey, here's what it used to look like, and here's what it looks like now, instead of just looking at some notes that somebody wrote down. But all that's increasing our storage needs dramatically and very, very quickly. So instead of having to go out and make a large purchase for a network area storage device, we've decided this is a good candidate to bring into cloud storage. And so we're actually going to be starting a pilot project with WPC soon to implement that cloud storage just for their attachments on their inspections and work orders. And I know Meg's going to be coming up and giving you an update on this a little later on, but once the council adopts a new brand, we're going to be working with her and her team to do that brand integration on the public website. We're also going to be looking at bringing system administration of Munis or the ERP system into technology services. And then the last one on here, and this one's kind of in the idea phase at the moment, and mostly just to kind of get you excited about what may be to come. But we're definitely looking at using smart devices, so Google Home, Amazon Alexa, things like that, and seeing how we can use those for the city's benefit. So there's a lot of cities out there that are using it to deliver news or other information, and so we're definitely looking into that. And that's the end of my presentation, but I'd be willing to answer any questions that you all may have.
Councilman Lewis.
My dream is to have a calendar that I'm a citizen, I'm home, and I click, and here's the city webpage, and here's the week of March 1, for example. And on that calendar, it tells me every committee meeting where it is. Is that possible?
Yes. So
Is it your job to do it?
we'd probably be working with Meg together, but yes, yeah, we could.
I mean,
we could do
is that possible? Seriously, that is my dream. We have so many subcommittees, and they're dealing with so many important things
Yeah.
that I think it would be wonderful
Yeah.
for it to be a simple thing as opposed to go to planning commission, look at the agenda, and then look at the minutes. I mean, that's too many clicks, and I'm gonna give up. But one click, and I see a calendar.
See a calendar, yeah. No, I think
That would
that's a
be
great-
awesome, Mr. City Manager.
Great idea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next.
Next on the agenda, you may remember a few weeks ago at the study session, our consultant from Chandler Think shared the rollout of the new city brand with you. That was just a practice run. Actually, tonight is the final presentation of the brand. So Meg Lewis is here, our Public Information Officer, to share a little update with you.
So About a month ago, this is the logo that all of you saw. And as our consultant, Mr. Chandler, spoke to you, the logo is not the brand. But after we presented this to you, this came to our attention. And it was determined that the Independence, Iowa logo was too close to our proposed logo. They came to fruition in completely different ways. This was the firework that you saw about a month ago was a result of the committee's collaboration together and looking at multiple designs, and that was the one that they came to. Independence, Iowa, came to the same image in a different way. So our consultant immediately said, they're too close, we have to go back. So they said, let's create a better one. And we loved the colors that they presented to us. We like the fonts that they gave us for Independence and Missouri. Those are not changing. Those are staying the same. But we did have to go back and look at the icon. They focused on our brand story and the terms that really create a picture in your head of what could be associated with independence and what the mark and the positioning line need to do. So it's still patriotic, and our brand is patriotic. We are Independence, Missouri, and it came to this. This was presented to the brand steering committee, and upon reflection, they all have liked this one better. There is a pre-existing association with the name Independence, and we will continue to make that the dominant portion of it. The flame is symbolic in that it stands for independence as a place where people can be inspired. It is a nod to the eternal flame of President Truman that is displayed at the Truman Library. It consists of 3 strokes, which represent the historic Santa Fe, California, and Oregon trails. And the blue was chosen to provide the City of Independence a corporate and professional tone. So these are just some examples of it, again, with our different departments and the concepts with that new logo to show you that the brand didn't change, just that logo image that was associated with the city. And as you can see, we still use the fireworks because fire can obviously start the fireworks as a graphic, and it will be incorporated in the letterhead. It is part of the business cards, but it is not the focus that it once was. So just different ways that you can see it throughout the graphic representations that they gave us last time. So that is the update. I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have. Next week, we will be giving you a resolution to approve the new brand and the logo for implementation. And upon that approval, we will hit the ground running the next day. So I am happy to answer any questions or talk to you about the project if you have them.
I gotta let this soak in myself. I'm still a fan of the Truman and the solo and of his presence there. All the data that was presented by Chandler talks about Truman, the top 3, top 4 things. I mean, this is better. This is a little better. That's a busy.
It is very difficult to represent President Truman in a graphic in a way that is easily recognizable to people outside of the community. So if you look at the Walking Truman on Truman Road now, people outside of the community or some of the younger generations do not readily recognize that that is who is being represented in those images.
Are they going to be able to point that flame to Truman?
No.
No.
Not at all.
That's the fun of
Okay.
art, is that it is
Okay.
all about interpretation. So while there is a literal interpretation
Sure.
to the tip to his eternal flame, it's more than that.
What,
Let it soak in still.
what's wrong with the wagon and the mules? I mean, I always liked that. I mean, did the committee look at that at all? Do we need to change something that's worked for 50 years?
The seal is still going to be used on official documents.
So why don't we use it with everything?
Because it loses some of its gravitas. If
I
you
don't know
use
what
it on
that
everything.
means, I'm sorry.
Gravitas is its importance, its officialness.
But don't we want people with a brand to look at it and know exactly what they're talking about? Independence, if you didn't have the word Missouri, I wouldn't know what you're talking about.
And
Independence,
that's
a
what
great
the brand
American
is going to
story.
be telling you more about. That's what the images associated with it will do. That's what the content on the page will do. That's what the staff member wearing the logo will do. They're going to be telling you the brand story. They're the ones that are interpreting it, not the logo. So the brand is more than the image that you see there. And that's what the overall study over the last year was about. The seal, when used on a business card for a council member or an official document that we send to the governor or to the White House when we're talking to them about different things, that with that seal means more than the everyday use of our business cards or stationery that we might use here within our citizens in the community. So the seal will be continued to use. It will be proudly displayed in City Hall, and it will be part of our official documents, so proclamations, all of those important pieces. But the day-to-day use, the day-to-day images associated with the city will be more current. What we heard in the committee and in our research, and you see it in the brand story, while the trails are important about who Independence was, and it is the large part of why we are here today, we've expanded beyond that. So we're no longer just the trails, and we're no longer just the home of President Truman. We're the trails, Truman, and much more. So it was important to the committee that the logo and the brand went beyond that historic representation and also looked towards the future of the city.
Well, I'm just going to disagree, and that's fine. I just think Independence, Missouri has its own unique history. I'm proud of our unique history. I think that's our biggest draw right now, is our history. And Independence, a great American story, could be Independence, Pennsylvania. I think we should build on what we've got to make it stronger. I don't want to be like everybody else because we're not like everybody else, and I want us to have a seal and an easily recognizable brand, one thing. So I'm probably going to vote no next week, and you're not at all surprised at that. So I just thought I'd mention it.
I understand what you're saying. So one of the things that we will hit the ground rolling through the implementation is how do we tell those stories? And history is an important part of that. I'm really excited about a project that one of the City 17 members is working on, focusing on the Black history of the City of Independence and some of the unique chapters that are often overlooked in that. And so that's part of the brand. We'll be talking to our staff and how they can implement that brand into the story of their work every day. But what the key here is we have 40 logos throughout the city at different times, and our citizens don't know who they're interacting with on a regular basis. And by going to one consistent logo, we'll better be able to represent who the city is and who we are as a community.
Thank you. The feedback I get, and to reiterate what Councilman DeLucia said, the history, most of the people I talk to, just as you know, but want that historical part. So, and I know this is the simplification, and we're just giving all our wants and not wants here. So, historic above to be Independence, Missouri, a great American story. Most of the feedback I got, and people have come to me and saying, welcome to historic Independence, Missouri. I don't want that to limit our future or the brightness of it, but it seems to be very near and dear to everybody's heart that be a part of or logo. Take it how you want. I'm not here to argue with you about it, but that's the feedback I got, and the people would like me to put that in. Anybody else?
I'll go again. I was really surprised about the comments that I had received. The comments I received have told me that the backstory is great. I mean, Chandler did a really great job putting that backstory together. A great American story. What defines a great American story other than President Truman, who goes from farm boy, World War I, to county judge, president, to desegregation of the Army in 1948, to the United Nations, the impact that was had there. I mean, that's a heck of an American story that is greatly unique to us. So I got to let that soak in, and I'll see how that works. But the backstory has been the most positive thing that I have heard throughout the community talking about that. He did hit a home run on that one, for sure. Don't want to be completely negative. I still like Truman.
He will be incorporated in the brand implementation. We're looking for ways to collect the stories of those generations that remember Truman and ensure that we keep those for future generations, as well as imagery that we can incorporate appropriately throughout all of this. So
Thank you, Meg.
he will not be forgotten.
Thank you. So, city boards and communications report?
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem and Council, we have one item on our report tonight. A recommendation has been received to appoint Cindy Rogers as a representative of the Independent Square Merchants Association to be placed on the Tourism Commission. So I'm just looking for a recommendation of the council as a whole to place that on the next meeting for
Mr.
her
Mayor,
appointment.
Pro Tem.
I would move, we do.
Second.
Will you call?
I will do the roll call. Council members Huff,
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes.
DeLucy.
Yes.
Robertson.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Van Camp.
Yes.
And then also, you'll just see on the second page, there's just a list of our current vacancies, expired terms. So if you all would take a look at that and let me know if there's anyone you find interested in those appointments, and there's a couple that are specific to council's seat on appointments. So that's all I have.
So, are there any other topics that the council would like to talk about?
Mr. City Manager, can I ask you to give me a deadline on when my dream of that calendar will be fulfilled? Give any clue on when I can quit dreaming about something and maybe just look at it when I'm wide awake?
I will get back to you on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes. Okay. We are adjourned.
Putting him on the spot.
I know.